Hello everyone and welcome to another video of Wargame Airland Battle. This is going to be another of the tutorial videos when I explain the mechanics of the game for those of you who don't really know them yet. And in this particular video we are going to visit the unit stats. When you go to the armory, you can see all the 864 units you have available in the game, and all around the different nations and in the different alliances. So you can go to the to the pact. You can select the USSR only. You can select the East German only. You can select whatever units you want to see. But of course, the next thing you want to know is what are the unit stats and how they affect the performance of the unit in the game. In the first video we saw the different categories of units you have in the game. You have logistics, you have infantry, you have support, you have tanks, you have reconnaissance, you have vehicles, helicopters and planes. Now, each one of them, when you hover above it, you can just see its stats, and when you select one of them you will have the stats here, and for easy comparison you can just hover your mouse over another one to see how they compare. But then again, you want to see what exactly affects the unit performance. So let's go, for instance, for a tank. Let's select the Americans, because it's the hardware most people are used to and know better, and let's go to the M1A1 Abrams. Okay, unit screen is here, and here you will see the different stats of the vehicle. First of all, you have here the little icon that will show in the game when this unit is around. So in case of the tanks of heavy armor, or light armor, in case of tanks, they are square with a circle inside. You will have the cost, the nationality, of course, the name, and just below you have 3 spaces. Its unit has the potential to have up to 3 different weapons. Doesn't mean every single one of them is going to have 3 different weapons. For instance, let's see, the M8 AES has only 2, just for instance, but has the potential to have up to 3. In the case of the Abrams, it's the M256 main cannon, the M2 Browning heavy machine gun, and the M240 light machine gun, or medium machine gun. Well, it's actually a light machine gun. So those are the 3 weapon systems the unit has. Just below each one of these icons, you will have the stats of the pertaining weapon. So in the case of the M256, you will have 2 things here that declare that the weapon shoots kinetic energy rounds and has an AOE, area of effect, explosion wherever the shoot lands. This is very important. First of all, there are different kind of weapons in the game. Kinetic energy, has the property that the closer you are to the target, the higher the penetration will be. Of course, because they are reliant on kinetic energy. There are some tanks that have different stats. For instance, the Sheridan has a HEAT round, which is high explosive anti-tank. And in this case, these shells will penetrate the same no matter how far or close you are. So when you are with an M1A1 Abrams, you have to remember that the closer you are to the enemy, the higher the penetration will be. There are, of course, many different variables for this. For instance, let's see the I don't know what to select. What it is. The M728C2E has an AOE stat. Stat means stationary. The weapon can only be fired when static. And as you can see, it's not kinetic energy nor HEAT, because this round doesn't penetrate anything, doesn't have AP power. So you want to see exactly what your weapons are good for and what they are going to be better at. So a kinetic energy weapon will be better the closer you are to the enemy. HIAT won't be affected by distance at all, and if you don't have either kinetic or HIAT, your round simply will not penetrate armor. AoE, as we saw, is the area of effect. So this has an area of effect when he's fighting against infantry. For instance, there will be a small area where this suit will affect. We will see more about that later. Next in line is the range of the weapon. In the case of this cannon, is 2,275 meters. So that's the longest you can fire against an enemy. Next, you will have range against helicopters and range against airplanes. Now, if they are grayed out, means that that particular weapon can't target that kind of stuff. For instance, the M2 Browning, we see it has a range versus ground, a range versus helicopters, but it can't target planes. Next in line is accuracy. Now, that's the chance you have to hit at the first shot at the longest range you can engage at. So this value is 11 for 2,275 meters. Now, for each point you have in this accuracy stat, you will have a 5% chance of hitting. So an 11 is a 55% chance of hitting baseline. Because later veterancy bonuses apply, so higher veterancy tanks will have a higher chance, base chance, to hit an enemy. But this is the lower accuracy this tank has. So it has a 55% chance of hitting at the longer range. The closer you are, the higher chances to hit. I don't know exactly how it varies with distance, but it really goes up really quickly. So 11 accuracy is really very good. For instance, it's a 55% flat range chance at 2,275 meters before veterancy applies, and it will go up the closer you are to the target. Next in line is the AP power. This is the armor penetration of the weapon, and this applies when you are shooting against enemy tanks. It has a value that you will see later that each tank has values for the armor, but for instance in this weapon is 19. Next in line is the HE power, which is the damage that the weapon does to non-armor targets. And here is where the AoE area of effect enters. So if you are shooting against infantry, the game assumes the tank commander is choosing to shoot HE, and this HE power will apply to the place where the shot falls in. For instance, 3 in this case. HE power has poor to no effect on armored units. However, it has an effect. So if you are in a very lightly protected unit, for instance, a paper tank like the, I don't know, B150, as you can see, the armor is very low. We will see armor in a second. HE power can actually defeat that very light armor, but against some meaningful armor, HE doesn't really do much. But in this case, we have AP, so if you are shooting with this cannon against an armor enemy, the system assumes you are shooting AP. Next is suppression, and that's the damage the weapon causes to the enemy morale. So if you are shooting with this weapon to an enemy infantry unit, for instance, and you hit close enough, you will cause 121 suppression, which is pretty decent, and it adds up. So you can force some units to panic very quickly if shooting with high suppression weapons, and that's an important stat for some units. For tanks, well, it's actually important because if you are shooting at enemy tanks and you are not penetrating totally them, or you are dealing very low damage because you can't really penetrate his armor, at least you will be suppressing him. He can panic, he can become even routed if you are shooting at him long enough, even if you are not really dealing fatal damage or you are dealing very little damage. And morale is very important in this game. Routed or routed units simply aren't under your control. They are simply trying to flee. But panicked units really suffer a lot of penalties in accuracy, for instance. So they are much less effective when shooting at the enemy. Next, you have the rate of fire, which is the rounds per minute the weapon fires. In this case, it's 10 rounds per minute, which is very high for a heavy cannon. Let's add that particular thing. So, of course, the higher, the better. Now, there's a special case in case of the automatic weapons, because you will see it has a quite low accuracy of only 15% at top range. Very low HE power of 0.75, not that great. So, well, actually for a machine gun this is really good, 90, sorry. But it has a very high rate of fire of 500 rounds per minute. So these stats are applied per shot. So you are shooting a lot of bullets at the enemy, and some of them, just for chance, they are going to hit and they are going to deal damage. But in case of cannons, well, it's just one shot per shot. You are not firing in automatic mode, so yeah, that's it. So that's it for the weapons. There are a lot of different weapons in the game. For instance, let's see the Sheridan is a case of an American tank that has an anti-tank missile. So you can see, well, it has exactly the same stats, but they describe the weapon. So for instance, this is a Silica C missile, which is high explosive anti-tank, which is a guided missile, and you can see here its operator needs to stand still and aim at the target until the impact, which means that if you shoot this missile and you start moving your tank before the missile hits, the missile will lose track and the missile will miss. So pay close attention to these stats. They are very important. You also have, of course, the amount of rounds per weapon system. For instance, the Sheridan has 15 rounds for the main cannon and 7 Cyclos missiles, which this semi-active command line of sight of something like that. This was a system where the operator placed a sight on the enemy and the missile will automatically go to that place. If you have played Battlefield 3, for instance, or Battlefield Bad Company 2, the 84 is a Cyclos missile. So, well, pay close attention to each one of these stats because it's really important. And different systems will have very different stats, and it's actually important to notice the differences between these. Because, for instance, in choppers, let's go to choppers. You have here the Apache, which has a fire and forget missile. So as soon as you shoot the missile, you can move your helicopter freely and the missile will guide to the target. But if you go to then a Cobra, you will see that the TOW has a guided missile and you need to stand still until the missile hits. So this really affects the way you should play your units in the game. So moving on, we were with the Abrams. Next in line comes the armor. And here you have the stats of the armor in 4 different parts of the tank. In front of the little tank, here, you will see the frontal armor. In most cases, if not all, armored units have the strongest armor in the front. So it's really important to aim with the front of your tank towards the enemy, because it's where your armor is the strongest. The number below the tank is actually the side armor, which is the armor you have on the side of the tank, and if you are receiving fire from the side of your tank, this is the armor that it will be applied. So you can see, for instance, in the Abrams, you have 17 in front, 9 on the side. So it's really important that you are aiming to the front towards the enemy. Behind the tank, you have the rear armor, which of course is really weak in most cases. It's 5 in the case of the Abrams. And above the tank you have the top armor, which might seem a little bit, well, why do you want to know which is the armor in the top? Well, there are some ammunitions, particularly in case of the planes, um, cluster bombs. Cluster bombs are 80 weapons that drop bomblets over the enemy, and they have an AP power. And the AP power, as you can see, has a value. Usually it's not very high. For instance, in the case of the Rockeye 2, it's only 4. But these are a lot of little droplets, bomblets, that fall over the enemy and is on the top of the vehicle. So the top armor is not to be ignored, because really it's important in some cases. So back to the Abrams. Top armor, rear armor, side armor, and frontal armor. Here you have a more or less, well, bar kind of stats where you can track the front armor, the side armor, the back, and the rear. By the way, all these stats are color coded. A blue bar means very good. A green bar means above average, rather good. A yellow means average or below average, not really good. And red means poor. But this is actually, well, kind of debatable, because for instance, in the case of a tank, side armor of 9 is really great, because if you compare it with, I don't know, an M60, you will see an 8 here. You compare it with I don't know, an M48 and it's only 3. So actually 9 side armor is really good, but it's still kind of a warning that be careful, don't show your side to the enemy. And finally, down here you have the stats, well, the definitions and the kind of modifiers to the tank. First is the strength. In case of vehicles, this is the health bar, so to speak. So you have 10 health in this particular case. Size means how easy to conceal the target, the unit is. The smaller the better. Very small units can hide in very small bushes. Big units have a really tough time finding proper cover. So for instance, this is a big tank, so you will have problems concealing yourself in slow rows of bushes. You will need a forest or something really big to conceal your tank. Also, this is a modifier to the chances to be hit. The bigger you are, the easier it is to hit you. It's not a big thing. I mean, I think it goes from minus 10% to chances to be hit if you are very small, to a plus 10% chances to be hit if you are big. But still, it plays a role. Next is the optics, which can be bad, medium, good, very good, or excellent. Now this determines the ability of the tank to see surrounding units and the distance from where they can spot them. This is a very important mechanics, because in this game recon is really important because of that. You can see, for instance, the M1A1 Abrams has a really good optics of medium for a tank, because most tanks have poor. You can see that even the first Abrams has poor optics. But reconnaissance vehicles and squads, most of them have good, very good, or even excellent or exceptional optics. So you usually want your combat units supported with some kind of recon that spots for them. But still, if you send the Abrams alone, well, they still have medium optics, which is not bad at all. Next in line comes the speed. And this is the off-road speed, the speed of the unit just moving around. In case of the Abrams, it's 60 km per hour, pretty decent. But next, you have the road speed. There's an order in the game which is move fast. And move fast gives the order to the vehicle to use roads to move quicker. And of course, road speeds are quicker. You can see 110 km per hour on the road versus 60 km per hour cross country. So yeah, these are the two speed stats you want to look at. Next comes stealth. The stealthier, well, the less chance you have to be spotted by an enemy. This goes hand to hand with optics to determine how far your unit can see and which are the chances of your unit to see an enemy before the enemy sees you. So if you are in a big tank with poor stealth and medium optics, and you are trying to find a recon unit which is very small, very stealthy, and has very good optics, they are going to see you way before you see them. So this goes on with that. Next comes fuel capacity and autonomy. These two come hand to hand. First is autonomy. So 500 kilometers. Well, actually, no. But it's kind of a measure stick to know how far the unit will go. 500 is kind of pretty good. However, fuel capacity 2000 liters. Now, in case of all the units in the game, except for supply units, the fuel's capacity is the the size of the number of liters the tank carries to get this autonomy. So if 500 kilometers to 2000 liters of fuel capacity. When this tank is refueled, will be refueled to the top, which means that we'll receive up to 2000 liters, and that's a lot of supplies. You can make yourself an idea of how fuel efficient or inefficient a unit is by dividing the autonomy by the fuel capacity. For instance, let's see a pattern. A pattern was 1,450 liters and 4,000 kilometers of autonomy. Less thirsty unit as the LVPT-7 has 700 liters and reaches 480 kilometers. Has a very similar range to the Abrams, but when you have to resupply it, it will demand much lower supplies. So what you see in the case of the Abrams is really a supply hog. You need a very big amount of supplies to keep these units properly, to keep them up to the top. Next comes the stabilizer. The stabilizer comes from non-existent, bad, average, good, or very good. And this rules the chances you have to hit the enemy when on the move. If you don't have a stabilizer, your chances to hit an enemy, no matter the distance, no matter what, is a flat 5%. If you have a bad stabilizer, I think is 20% of the nominal accuracy. If you have a medium, I think it's half. If you have a very good, it's 80% or something like that. In any case, a very good stabilizer means that being on the move, you will likely hit most of the times, compared with the times you would hit if you were static. And this is a very important stat, because if you are doing progressive defense, flexible defense, and you are withdrawing your tank and you're moving backwards facing the enemy, you can shoot on the move with very high chances of hitting the enemy if you have a very good stabilizer. But if you have a medium stabilizer, there will be much lower chances to hit, and if you have no stabilizer, you won't hit at all. Most of the times you have a 5% chance, which is really low. So very good stabilizer determines the ability of the tank to shoot on the move. So you want to also value that when you are choosing your tanks. Next comes the gear. Gear in the case of the M1A1 is 9085. This is very important because when you are building a deck, you can choose if you want a Cat A, Cat B, or Cat C. Which means Cat A is you can choose between all the units of your nation. Cat B means you can only choose units from before 9080. And Cat C means that you only can choose units from before 1975. We will see more about this in deck building and how to build a deck, but you will have bonuses to compensate for the fact that you can't get the most modern units. So it's kind of a balancing act. We will talk about that in another video. Next in line comes the type of the combat groups the unit may belong to, which is again something that goes on with deck building and picking bonuses. In case of the N1A1, you only can have them in a mechanized or an armored deck, only or in a general or around deck. And there's another little stat which comes only with some units, which is prototype. Prototype means that this unit can only be used in decks that are American only. So if you have a narrow deck with units from all nations, this unit you won't be able to choose. In the case of the tanks, for instance, the MBT-70 is also a prototype. You will only be able to choose it if you choose an American only deck. There are prototypes for most of the nations. For instance, packed units. I don't know. Let's take a look at the T80U. If I can find it, of course. T80. No, here, T80U. You will see that this is a prototype. So you will be only able to choose this one if you are in a Russian deck. And most nations have their prototypes that you can only choose from if you choose that particular nation only. So back to business. So these are the stats for a tank. Now most units have very similar stats in all around. So if you go to an infantry, let's take a look at the mountaineers, you will see that most of the stats are very similar. You have a rifle with has very similar stats. You have a range, you have an accuracy, you have an AC power, you have a suppression, you have a rate of fire. You don't have any armor, of course. You have an AT missile with its own stats, etc., but looks very similar. However, in case of the infantry or that kind of unit that is infantry based and not vehicle based, there are some differences. Most importantly in the strength, because we have seen that for a vehicle the strength is kind of the health bar, the amount of hit points the vehicle has. The more the better, of course, and the higher damage it will be able to take. However, in case of units as infantry, this number means how many soldiers the unit has. For instance, we have 15 in the mountaineers, which is really a lot. Infantry units usually the standard is 10. For instance, we will see that the rifleman, if I can find it, hold on, has 10, which is pretty much standard. Now, some special units as AA groups, Stinger units, have only 2. So, and you can see, it's only 2 soldiers. Some units as the special forces vary a lot from, well, 5, 10, 2 even. So that's the number of soldiers you have. And one thing to keep in mind here is that unlike vehicles, I mean, if you have I don't know, if you have an Abrams which is down to 1 life, it will still have all these stats like this, because, well, the unit has very low life, but the weapons are what they are. However, in case of an infantry unit, if you have I don't know, a Delta Force unit, which is a strength of 10, and you lose half your soldiers, you are going to lose half your rate of fire, because this stat is linked to the number of soldiers in the unit. So 10 soldiers, 320 rounds per minute. If you lose half your soldiers, this will be 160. And if you can look at this, well, actually no, because it's not really visible in that. Well, whatever. The thing is, that is very important because the strength is linked to this. Of course, mounted units don't have a fuel capacity or an autonomy capacity, but their vehicles have. So, for instance, this unit, this red eye unit, comes in an M35 truck, which has a fuel capacity, has an autonomy, has a size, has optics, has speeds, etc. Now, it's important to remember that these units have, for instance, the red eye unit has a medium optics. But this will only apply when they are dismounted. If they are aboard the truck, you will be seen with bad optics because it's what the truck has. So yeah, also keep that in mind. Now, finally, for planes, which is kind of the last kind of units, which is very different from others. You have the same thing with the weapons. You have very different kind of weapons with very different effects, etc. You have a strength, but in planes you have some different stuff. ACM, which is electronic countermeasures. This goes from none at all to bad, medium. Let's see if we have a good one around. Good or exceptional. And this is a modifier that you apply to the enemy anti-aircraft units and their chances to hit. For instance, I don't know, a unit that has a 50% chance to hit versus you, and if you don't have any electronic countermeasures, will apply that. If you have exceptional countermeasures, will means that they will have a penalty to the ability, well, to that percentage. So the chances to hit are much lower. I don't know exactly how the modifiers go because this was changed in last patch. But still, exceptional units is a pretty important thing in ACM. So when looking at that, you want really to measure how resistant to enemy anti-aircraft the unit is, especially if you are going to call them against a zone which you know is covered by anti-aircraft units. The higher the ACM, the higher the chance to avoid enemy fire, and not just about enemy anti-aircraft fire. This also covers other planes. Now the optics is the same. Speed, as you can see, there's no road speed. It's useless for a plane, but you also have a speed, which is the same because you can't move on a road again. Also have a stealth, also have fuel capacity, but in this case, well, it's not that important the fuel capacity or the autonomy, because, well, actually what is important is the autonomy. The fuel capacity is more or less meaningless because they will get automatically resupplied when they are back to base. And all planes come with a very good stabilizer. Well, actually, some don't have a stabilizer, but that's because they don't have any guns. But those units that have a fixed gun, they all have a very good stabilizer. They also have a year and a type, and a little icon, which is shown in the map when you are playing this particular unit. And that's mostly it for units. That's how they go. I could enter into details of many different units and go one by one, noting differences. But I'm going to leave that to you to, well, go into the armory and find by yourself how different units compare and which ones are better, which ones are worse, and which are good but don't apply to some kind of decks, and which are not that good but for some other kind of decks they apply really good. In any way and any case, this is it for this video. I hope you had fun, I hope you enjoyed, I hope you learned something, and as always, thank you very much for watching, and see you later.